Maria had been working at the luxurious downtown restaurant for almost a year. Every day she wore her crisp uniform, carried trays with careful precision, and greeted customers with her warm smile. Despite being a black woman in a place where most patrons were wealthy and often judgmental, she held her head high. She had learned early on that dignity and grace could speak louder than anyone's words. Still, some days were harder than others. She often faced subtle looks, sideways glances, or comments that reminded her she didn't quite belong in a world of privilege. But she had long since decided not to let that shake her. That afternoon, the restaurant was unusually busy. The sunlight poured through the tall windows, reflecting off the polished floors and the shiny silverware set on tables. The smell of rich sauces, fresh bread, and roasted coffee filled the air. Maria moved quickly between tables, balancing trays with drinks and meals, her mind focused on her duties. She had become accustomed to the rhythm of the place, the clatter of cutlery, the soft hum of conversation, and the occasional laughter of satisfied customers. To her, the restaurant was not just a workplace. It was a stage where she performed daily, not for applause, but to survive, to thrive, and to quietly prove her worth. It was during this busy afternoon that a man arrived who would change everything in that moment. He was a tall, imposing figure, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, with a confident air that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. He carried himself with an arrogance that seemed almost tangible, as though the air itself had to bend around him in respect. Maria had seen people like him before, wealthy, entitled, and often cruel, but she had learned to remain professional, to smile politely and keep her head down. Still, there was something different about him, a sharpness in his eyes that made her uneasy. The man was seated near the grand piano, a beautiful instrument that stood like a centerpiece in the middle of the restaurant. It was polished to a shine, the black and white keys gleaming under the sunlight. Their talent. Maria had noticed it many times before and had admired it quietly from afar. Though she had been learning piano since she was a child, she never had the chance to perform publicly. Playing had always been her escape, a private world where she could pour out her emotions, away from the harsh judgments of others. As she approached his table to take his order, he spoke in a tone that dripped with mockery. "You there?" he said, pointing to her. "I want to hear you play that piano. Surely someone like you can't be completely tone deaf, right?" The words were meant to sting. The way he said "someone like you" carried condescension, a clear message that he considered her inferior because of her background and appearance. The rich man leaned back, a smirk on his face, clearly expecting entertainment at her expense. Maria froze for a brief moment. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel every pair of eyes in the restaurant turning toward her. Some were curious, others amused, waiting to see what would happen. She felt the weight of the room press on her shoulders, heavy with judgment, expectation, and a quiet, cruel anticipation. It was exactly the kind of situation she dreaded being singled out, humiliated in front of strangers, her every move scrutinized. But as Maria looked at the grand piano, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't fear anymore. It was determination. She reminded herself that she had spent countless hours practicing in secret, learning to express herself through music even when no one was watching. She had faced hardship her entire life, growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, where talent often went unnoticed, and where she constantly had to prove her worth just to be seen. This was just another challenge, one she could turn into her moment if she dared. Still, stepping toward the piano was not easy. She felt her hands tremble slightly as she moved through the restaurant, her uniform brushing against the polished floor. Whispers followed her path, some patron comments laced with doubt, others tinged with curiosity. She could hear a few laughs, some cruel, some nervous, but she forced herself to block them out. Each step brought her closer to the instrument and closer to a choice: shrink under humiliation or rise above it. When she reached the piano, she paused, her fingers hovering just above the keys. The man watched her closely, his smirk widening as if he were enjoying a private joke at her expense. "Go on," he said, his voice sharp. "Show us what you've got." The words were heavy, but Maria drew a deep breath. She remembered all the mornings she had woken up early to practice, all the nights she had stayed up late in her small room, letting her fingers dance over the keys while her family slept. All the moments she had quietly built this skill, despite having no encouragement or resources. The restaurant fell silent. The hum of conversation faded as people sensed the tension. Some leaned forward, curious to witness the unfolding scene. Maria sat down at the piano, feeling the cold ivory beneath her fingers. She could feel the eyes of the rich man, of the other diners, and even her own nervous heartbeat. But in that moment, she decided not to think about fear, judgment, or ridicule. She decided to play for herself first, for the music, for the years of dedication that no one could take away from her. The first notes she played were tentative, soft, almost like a whisper. She could hear the surprise ripple through the room. Many hadn't expected even that. But with each passing moment, her confidence grew. The melody began to flow more naturally, guided by memory and emotion. Maria's mind cleared of doubt as her hands moved gracefully over the keys, bringing life to the piano in a way that few had anticipated. The rich man's expression began to change. The smugness faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. For the first time, he realized that he might have underestimated her. Even as she played, Maria felt a surge of empowerment. The moment that had started as humiliation was slowly transforming into something entirely different. She wasn't just a waitress under scrutiny anymore. She was an artist. A young woman asserting her worth in a world that often tried to belittle her. The music filled the restaurant, weaving a spell over patrons who had come expecting drama or comedy at her expense. Instead, they heard talent, passion, and grace. Though the first part of her performance was brief, it was enough to make an impact. The rich man leaned back, now uncertain, while Maria's eyes sparkled with the knowledge that she had survived the first test. She knew this was only the beginning of the story she would tell through her music. But she had already taken control of the moment, turning potential shame into quiet. Undeniable strength in that single, intense afternoon. Maria realized something important. Humiliation could be confronted. Fear could be challenged, and those who sought to mock her had no power over the skill. Courage and resilience she had nurtured in silence. And as she lifted her hands from the keys, ready to continue, the entire restaurant held its breath, waiting for what she would do next. After the initial tension of being called to the piano, Maria felt a strange mix of fear and determination swirling inside her. Her hands were still hovering above the keys, and the first soft notes she had played lingered in the room, like a whisper that refused to fade. The rich man was leaning back in his chair, clearly expecting her to falter, to make a mistake that would amuse him and the other diners. Maria could almost hear the unspoken thoughts of the patrons, some curious, some skeptical, others quietly rooting for her. Every eye in the restaurant was on her, but she refused to let that intimidate her. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. Her mind raced with memories of all the times she had felt underestimated. All the moments people had judged her based on her appearance, her job, or her background. Growing up, she had always been different from many of her peers. Her family didn't have much money, but they valued education and hard work. Music had always been her refuge. While other children played outside or watched TV, Maria spent hours at a small keyboard her parents had managed to buy secondhand, teaching herself to play, learning from borrowed books, old recordings, and every opportunity she could find. The piano had always been more than just an instrument to her. It was a place where she could express herself, where her emotions could flow freely, unjudged. Now, standing before the grand piano in the middle of the restaurant, Maria realized that all those years of quiet practice had led to this moment. She reminded herself that she had a choice. She could let fear take over, stumble over the keys, and become the source of the rich man's cruel amusement. or she could rise above it, play with confidence, and let her talent speak louder than his arrogance. A small spark of courage lit inside her chest, and she decided that she would not let anyone, not even this wealthy man with his mocking tone, dictate her worth. As she opened her eyes and looked down at the polished keys, Maria began to visualize the music in her mind. She remembered the melodies she had practiced countless times in her small room at home. She remembered how she had spent nights perfecting pieces she didn't even perform for anyone, purely for the love of playing. The notes, once faint and timid in her imagination, now began to flow through her fingers. She knew that the first few seconds would be critical. They would set the tone for the entire performance. She had to play with purpose, letting the music carry her confidence across the room. The restaurant was unusually quiet now. The clatter of dishes and murmur of conversation had almost stopped, as everyone sensed the tension and anticipation. Even the waitstaff had paused for a moment, their trays forgotten, watching to see how this young waitress would respond to the rich man's humiliating demand. Maria could feel the weight of their gazes, and for a moment doubt crept in. What if I mess up? She thought. What if everyone laughs at me? But she quickly pushed the fear aside. She reminded herself of all the obstacles she had overcome before, all the moments when she had proven that her determination and hard work could outshine the judgment of others. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, letting them hover for just a moment. Then, almost instinctively, she began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, and filled with emotion. They weren't meant to impress or to show off, but to ground herself, to find her rhythm, to claim the space as her own. She let her fingers move naturally, guided by years of practice and the music that had become part of her soul. Each note she played carried a piece of her history, her dreams, her passion. As the melody filled the room, something remarkable happened. Maria felt herself slipping into a state of flow, a place where fear and self-doubt no longer existed. She was no longer just a waitress being mocked by a wealthy man. She was a musician, a storyteller using the piano as her voice. The room seemed to shift around her. The patrons, who had been waiting for a spectacle, were now leaning forward, captivated by the sound. The rich man, who had expected a humiliating display, now looked surprised, his confident smirk faltering slightly. He realized that he might have underestimated her. Maria allowed herself a small smile as she played. She felt the energy in the room change with each note. The initial fear she had felt transformed into excitement. She could feel her confidence growing with every chord, every arpeggio. Her hands moved more freely, expressing the emotions she had held inside for years. Music was no longer just a skill. It was her armor, her way of claiming dignity and respect in a world that often tried to deny her both. While she played, Maria also noticed something else. The other diners, who had come expecting entertainment at her expense, were no longer mocking her. Their eyes were wide with amazement, their expressions filled with surprise and admiration. Some were even smiling quietly, appreciating her skill and the courage it took to perform under such pressure. In that moment, Maria realized that she was not alone. The music had united the room in a shared experience, transforming tension and anticipation into awe and respect. She also remembered why she loved playing piano in the first place. It wasn't about recognition or applause. It was about connection. Every note she played carried a story, an emotion, a piece of herself. And now, standing there in front of a crowd, she realized that she could share that story even in the face of mockery. The thought gave her strength. She didn't need the rich man's approval, nor did she need his mockery to define her worth. She was capable, talented, and resilient. And she intended to show that to the world, starting with the people in this restaurant, with her confidence building. Maria began to prepare for the next phase of her performance. She could feel the anticipation of the audience growing. She knew that the rich man was watching, expecting a mistake, a slip, something to laugh at. But she was no longer afraid of him. Every note she played reminded her of her journey, the sacrifices, the practice, the resilience. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had already begun to turn the situation around, transforming humiliation into an opportunity to shine in those few minutes before her full performance. Maria gathered all her courage, reminding herself that this was her moment. She had faced fear before, and she had always risen above it. Now, in front of a room full of strangers and one wealthy man who sought to belittle her, she was ready to show not just skill, but heart, passion, and determination. The music that had once been a private refuge was about to become a powerful statement, a declaration that she could not be underestimated. That talent and courage could triumph over arrogance and cruelty. And so, with a deep breath, she prepared to continue, letting the piano carry her forward. Every tremor of fear had been replaced by determination. Every doubtful thought had been silenced by the memory of her hard work and love for music. Maria knew that the moment had arrived to transform a situation meant to humiliate her into something extraordinary. A display of courage, talent, and resilience that no one in that restaurant would ever forget. Maria's fingers hovered over the piano keys for a moment, feeling the smooth, cold surface beneath them. The room was quiet, every patron's eyes fixed on her. The rich man sat back in his chair, a smug smile still lingering on his face, certain that he would be entertained by her failure. Some of the diners whispered among themselves, some skeptical, some curious, wondering if this young waitress could actually play at all. Maria, however, blocked out everything around her. She only focused on the piano, the keys, and the music she had spent years mastering in the secrecy of her small room at home. The first note she struck was soft and gentle, almost hesitant, like a quiet breath. It was a simple melody, something calm to gather her courage and ground herself in the moment. The rich man raised an eyebrow, expecting her to stumble, but she didn't. The sound filled the restaurant, subtle yet clear, and it drew the attention of everyone present. Maria let the notes flow naturally, each one carrying a small piece of her story, her hard work, her dreams, and the quiet determination that had kept her moving forward even when life tried to knock her down. As the melody continued, Maria began to feel a strange sense of calm wash over her. Her nervousness began to fade, replaced by the focus and concentration she had always experienced when playing piano alone. She remembered all the nights she had practiced in a tiny room, her fingers learning to dance over the keys while her family slept. She remembered the feeling of losing herself in music, how every note seemed to carry a story that words could not express. That feeling was back now, stronger than ever, giving her the courage to continue despite the rich man's mocking gaze. The diners, who had been expecting a scene of humiliation, were now leaning forward, captivated by the sound. There was a shift in the room. The laughter and whispers faded, replaced by quiet admiration. Even the waitstaff paused in their tasks, drawn to the piano as Maria's hands moved skillfully across the keys. The music had a life of its own, filling the space with emotion and beauty. Maria could feel it resonating in the room, touching the hearts of those who were listening. She realized in that moment that she had the power to change the entire atmosphere, to turn fear and judgment into wonder and respect. Her melody began to grow more confident. She added subtle flourishes, small variations in rhythm and tempo that showcased her skill without being showy. Every movement of her fingers was precise yet fluid, demonstrating not just technical ability, but also emotional depth. The music flowed like a river, moving effortlessly from soft, gentle passages to richer, fuller chords. The room was silent except for the sound of the piano, and every note seemed to pull the audience deeper into her world. Maria could feel the rich man's smirk beginning to fade. He had expected a performance that would be awkward or clumsy, something that would allow him to mock her in front of everyone. Instead, he was confronted with undeniable talent and composure. She could see the surprise in his eyes, the first hint of doubt. His arrogant demeanor wavered, replaced by an unspoken recognition that he had underestimated her. Maria didn't focus on him, though. She focused on the music, letting it guide her, letting it express all the confidence and resilience she had built over the years. With each passing moment, her fingers moved more freely, almost as if the piano itself were guiding them. She let herself immerse fully in the music, ignoring the rich man and any judgments around her. This was her moment, her opportunity to shine, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. The notes became richer, more complex. She began to incorporate techniques she had mastered through years of practice arpeggios, scales and chords that interwove with each other in beautiful harmony. The melody told a story of struggle and triumph, of quiet determination and unspoken strength. The patrons were mesmerized. Some had never heard such a display of skill in a public setting before. Their initial skepticism had been replaced with awe and admiration. Whispers of surprise and appreciation floated through the room, but Maria didn't notice them. She was completely absorbed in the music, each note an expression of her soul, each chord a declaration of her talent. Even the clinking of dishes and the low hum of conversation had faded into the background. The piano was the only thing that mattered, the only thing that demanded attention. As she played, Maria felt a surge of empowerment. She had turned a moment meant to humiliate her into a moment where she could assert herself, quietly but powerfully. The rich man had tried to belittle her, to showcase his superiority, but she was rewriting the narrative with every note. She realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a statement. Talent, courage, and determination could speak louder than arrogance and mockery. The music had given her a voice where words had failed, allowing her to reclaim her dignity in front of everyone. With her confidence growing, Maria began to experiment slightly with the melody. She added subtle dynamic soft passages followed by bold, resonant chords that demonstrated not just skill but emotional range. The audience was captivated, drawn into her world through sound. Even the rich man, who had expected entertainment at her expense, could no longer hide his surprise. His eyes followed her fingers as they moved expertly across the keys, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of how to react. The power had shifted. Maria was no longer vulnerable, and he was no longer in control. She could feel the energy in the room change with every passing moment. The patrons were no longer passive observers. They were participants in her performance, reacting with quiet admiration and awe. Maria could sense the collective emotion in the air, a mixture of surprise, respect, and amazement. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment where her years of practice and dedication were finally being recognized. The music carried her confidence outward, reaching everyone present and transforming the room from a place of tension to a space of admiration. As the piece continued, Maria felt her nerves completely melt away. She was no longer just responding to the rich man's demand. She was performing for herself, for the music, and for every person who had doubted her or underestimated her in the past. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, producing a melody that was both technically impressive and emotionally moving. The piano had become an extension of herself, a vessel through which she could communicate everything she had kept inside by the end of her initial performance. Maria had captured the full attention of everyone in the restaurant. The music lingered in the air, leaving a sense of awe and admiration that no one had expected. She had taken a situation meant to embarrass her and transformed it into an extraordinary display of talent and courage. The rich man, who had come expecting to mock her, now sat silently, his earlier arrogance replaced by an uncomfortable recognition of her skill. The audience had been captivated not by the humiliation he had intended, but by the power, grace, and emotion Maria had poured into her music. In that moment, Maria realized the true power of her talent. Music was not just about notes and rhythms. It was about expression, courage, and resilience. She had shown that even in the face of mockery and doubt, she could stand tall and command respect. Her performance was a testament to her determination, a vivid display of her skill and confidence. The room had shifted entirely, and she had done it without saying a word, simply through the beauty and power of her music. Maria felt the music flowing through her in a way she had never experienced before. The first part of her performance had already drawn the attention of everyone in the restaurant, shifting their perception from curiosity or mockery to admiration. Her hands had begun to move with complete confidence over the keys, as if the piano itself were guiding her. The notes she played were no longer just soft melodies. They were full of emotion, power, and life. Each chord carried a story, each arpeggio a declaration of strength, and every rhythm spoke of courage. She had found her voice. It was louder and more beautiful than anyone could have expected, The rich man, who had intended to humiliate her, leaned forward slightly, his smug expression beginning to fade. He had underestimated her, and it was clear in the way his eyes widened with surprise. He had thought she would falter, that her nervousness would betray her lack of skill. But Maria was proving him wrong with every note, transforming his cruel demand into a remarkable display of talent. He could no longer control the narrative. She had taken it entirely into her hands. As Maria's fingers moved across the keys, she began to add improvisation to her performance. She had spent years practicing classical pieces and learning jazz techniques in her small room at home. Now she drew on all of that knowledge and experience, weaving it together seamlessly. The melody shifted from gentle and soft to bold and intricate, capturing the attention of every diner in the room. Some leaned forward in disbelief, murmuring to one another, unable to hide their astonishment at the skill and creativity unfolding before them. Others sat in silence, completely captivated, their eyes fixed on her hands as they danced over the keys with precision and grace. The rich man's face, once filled with smug amusement, now revealed confusion and a flicker of fear. He had expected entertainment at her expense, but instead, he was confronted with brilliance. The performance was no longer about a waitress playing the piano, it was about Maria's determination, her skill, and her courage. He realized, perhaps too late, that his attempt to mock her had backfired spectacularly. The room had shifted entirely. The audience's admiration was palpable. He could do nothing to stop it. Maria began to play a complex jazz improvisation, something she had never performed in public before. The music was intricate, with fast runs, unexpected pauses, and harmonies that intertwined beautifully. It was bold, confident, and emotionally charged. The diners were stunned. Many had never heard such a performance in a restaurant setting, especially not from someone they had assumed was just a waitress. The richness of the notes, combined with the depth of emotion behind them, created a powerful effect that left everyone in awe. Some whispered to one another, saying they had never expected to witness something so extraordinary. Even the staff in the restaurant were captivated. The chefs, who were used to the background hum of diners and soft music, stopped what they were doing to listen. The other waiters, who had initially watched with curiosity, now stood silently, unable to tear their eyes away from Maria's hands. The music had transformed the atmosphere completely, turning what had been a tense and uncomfortable moment into a shared experience of wonder and admiration. Maria's confidence soared as she played. She felt a deep sense of liberation. The rich man's attempt to mock her no longer mattered. He had lost control of the situation entirely. She realized that this performance was more than just a response to his cruelty, was a moment to claim her own power, to show that talent, courage, and dedication could triumph over arrogance and prejudice. She let herself fully immerse in the music, pouring every ounce of emotion and skill she possessed into the performance. The improvisation built gradually, moving from soft, delicate passages to bold, powerful chords that filled the room. The complexity of the music revealed Maria's mastery of the piano and her creativity as a musician. She played with emotion, rhythm, and precision, captivating the audience in a way that no words could achieve. Each note told a story of resilience, courage, and the determination to rise above the judgment and mockery of others. As she played, Maria could feel the energy of the room responding to her. The diners' eyes followed her every movement, their expressions a mix of amazement and admiration. Some were smiling quietly, impressed by the beauty and complexity of her performance. Others were whispering in awe, realizing that they had witnessed something truly remarkable. The rich man, who had tried to control the situation and humiliate her, sat frozen, powerless to stop the effect she was having. He had intended to mock her, but instead, he had become a silent witness to her brilliance. The final part of her improvisation was particularly powerful. She moved with confidence and precision, letting the music build to a dramatic crescendo. The room was filled with rich, vibrant notes that seemed to echo through every corner, leaving the audience spellbound. Maria's skill and emotion were impossible to ignore, and the impact of her performance was clear. She had turned a moment of intended humiliation into a stunning display of talent and courage that left everyone in awe when the last note rang out. The restaurant was silent for a brief moment, as if no one could believe what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, growing louder and louder as patrons expressed their admiration. Some cheered, some clapped quietly, and others gave standing ovations. Maria sat at the piano, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She had faced fear, defied expectations, and transformed a moment of humiliation into a moment of triumph. The rich man finally looked around, realizing that his plan had completely failed. His smugness was gone, replaced by discomfort and a recognition that he had underestimated her. He had sought to humiliate Maria, but she had turned the situation entirely in her favor. She had proven that courage, skill, and determination could overcome arrogance and cruelty. Maria had not only impressed the diners and staff, but had also earned a sense of personal victory. She knew that her performance had changed the way everyone in the room saw her. She had gone from being a waitress under scrutiny to a remarkable musician commanding respect. The power of her music had allowed her to reclaim her dignity and assert her worth in a situation designed to belittle her. As the applause continued, Maria realized the significance of what had just happened. She had faced a challenge meant to humiliate her and had turned it into a display of skill,
passion,
and resilience that inspired everyone who witnessed it. The music had spoken louder than words, proving that talent and courage could overcome fear, prejudice, and mockery. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of pride and empowerment, knowing that she had not only survived the challenge, but had triumphed in a way that no one, not even the rich man, could ignore. The restaurant was still buzzing with excitement, patrons discussing what they had just seen. The energy in the room had completely transformed from tension and anticipation to admiration and awe. Maria had captured the hearts and minds of everyone present, turning a moment of potential humiliation into an unforgettable performance. She had shown that true talent, combined with courage and determination, could shine through even the harshest of circumstances. Maria's performance had achieved more than she could have imagined. She had not only proven her skill as a musician, but it also demonstrated the power of resilience and confidence. Her ability to take control of the moment, to rise above fear and mockery, and to deliver a performance that left everyone in awe was a testament to her character and strength. In that restaurant, on that day, Maria had become more than a waitress. She had become a symbol of courage, talent, and the triumph of determination over arrogance. When the last note of Maria's performance faded into the air, the restaurant remained alive with astonishment. Patrons were still clapping, some standing, some cheering quietly, and others whispering to each other in disbelief. Maria slowly lifted her hands from the piano, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She felt an incredible sense of relief and pride. The moment that had begun, as humiliation had turned into something far beyond her imagination. A moment of triumph that nobody would forget. The rich man, who had come intending to mock her, sat stunned, unable to hide the mix of shock and disbelief on his face. His arrogance had completely vanished. Word of Maria's performance spread almost instantly. A few diners, clearly impressed, pulled out their phones and began filming her. Others called friends or shared the story with family members, describing the young waitress who had transformed a moment of ridicule into a breathtaking display of talent. Even the restaurant staff, who had witnessed the performance firsthand, were amazed. They had watched her rise above fear, play with skill, and command the room with her music. The impact of her courage and talent resonated not just in the room but beyond it. Over the next few days, the story of Maria's performance began to circulate more widely. Some diners shared videos online, and before long, social media buzzed with admiration for the young waitress who had stunned everyone with her piano skills. People commented on how she had faced mockery with grace, transforming the situation into an inspiring moment of empowerment. Maria's courage became a symbol of resilience, reminding people that talent and determination could overcome prejudice and cruelty. Maria herself was still processing what had happened. She remembered the rich man's mocking words, the feeling of everyone staring at her, and the fear that had gripped her as she approached the piano. And yet, she realized how powerful it felt to rise above that fear, to play with confidence, and to command respect through her skill. The experience had not only proved her abilities to others, but had also deepened her own belief in herself. She felt a newfound sense of empowerment, understanding that her talent and dedication could create change, inspire people, and challenge assumptions. News outlets soon picked up the story. Local newspapers ran articles about the young waitress whose courage and talent had captivated an entire restaurant. Interviews followed, in which Maria humbly described her love for music, the years of practice she had put in, and how she had never expected to perform in front of such an audience. Her story resonated with many because it was not just about a piano performance. It was about determination, courage, and the power of believing in oneself, despite adversity. The attention brought new opportunities, and Maria began to see doors opening that she had never imagined. Music schools, local venues, and even professional musicians reached out to her, inviting her to perform and further develop her talent. Offers came for scholarships and mentorship programs, providing her with resources that she had previously lacked. Maria realized that what had begun as an unfortunate situation had now transformed into a turning point in her life. The very act of standing up, playing with courage, and refusing to be humiliated had changed her future. The piano, which had always been a private refuge, had become a bridge to recognition, opportunity, and inspiration. The rich man, meanwhile, quietly left the restaurant that day. His intended humiliation had completely failed. Instead of embarrassing Maria, he had inadvertently provided her with a stage to display her extraordinary talent. Maria's performance had humbled him in a subtle yet undeniable way, leaving him powerless to diminish her accomplishment. The contrast between his arrogance and her grace became a silent lesson to all who had witnessed it. That courage, skill, and integrity could overcome attempts to belittle others. As Maria reflected on the experience, she understood that this moment was not just about recognition or success. It was about reclaiming dignity, asserting worth, and proving to herself that she could face challenges head-on. The performance had been a triumph not only over the rich man's mockery, but also over the fear and self-doubt that anyone might feel in a similar situation. Maria's courage had shown that even in the face of intimidation, it was possible to rise above shine and inspire others. In the weeks and months that followed, Maria's life began to change in meaningful ways. She continued to work at the restaurant, but now she did so with a sense of pride and confidence that came from knowing she had impressed the world with her talent. Patrons began requesting her tables, hoping to witness her play or simply to meet the young woman whose courage had gone viral. Her colleagues admired her even more, and some even began taking lessons themselves. Inspired by her determination and skill, beyond the restaurant, Maria started performing at local events and music programs. She discovered that her performance had sparked a larger conversation about talent, opportunity, and resilience. Many people reached out to her, sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity and expressing gratitude for the inspiration she had provided. Maria realized that her courage had a ripple effect, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. She became not only a skilled musician, but also a role model for others, demonstrating that talent and determination could break through barriers and challenge prejudice. Maria also continued to develop her music, taking advantage of scholarships, mentorship programs, and new opportunities that allowed her to grow as an artist. Each performance she gave was a reminder of the moment in the restaurant when she had turned fear and mockery into triumph. That day remained etched in her memory as a turning point, a reminder of the power of courage, skill, and belief in oneself. In the end, Maria's story was not just about a piano performance. It was about transformation, resilience, and the ability to rise above challenges. She had faced humiliation and fear, and she had responded with talent, grace, and courage. She had turned a situation designed to belittle her into an unforgettable display of empowerment, leaving an entire room in awe. Her life had changed as a result, and she had become an inspiration to countless others, proving that even in the face of adversity, strength, determination, and skill could create remarkable opportunities. Maria's journey reminded everyone who heard her story that talent cannot be hidden forever. that courage can transform fear into power, and that respect is earned not through wealth or status, but through character, skill, and resilience. The restaurant performance that began with mockery had become a defining moment, a story of triumph that would continue to inspire long after the applause had ended. Maria had not only captured the hearts of those who watched her play, but had also set herself on a path of endless possibilities, demonstrating that one brave act could change everything.